should have said this at the top. The reason why you do not see me and Gillet sitting up here today, this is one of my favorite things about you all, is that our choir is just so big. They need all the space, and I am more than happy to give it to them. So, yet another thing to love about this place. All right, from Exodus chapter 3, the story of Moses, as is written in the New King James Version, Moses and the burning bush, and I have also adjusted the gendered language used to describe God in this passage. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of God appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when God saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And then God said, Do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Moreover, God said, I am the God of your family, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. This little wisdom story has it all. Curiosity, a God that knows him by name, a call, a willingness, a revelation, where you stand is holy, ancestors, lost in the wilderness, oh, and fear. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid. Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt writes, the most remarkable thing for me in this snippet of a story is not the burning bush. It's the moment where Moses takes notice of the bush and says to himself, hang on, this is incredible. I've got to stop and pay some attention to this. The moment where Moses' proverbial eyes are opened, right? His consciousness expanded because he's both willing and able to see the wonder that's right in front of him. And she goes on to say, Rabbi Rachel, there's Midrash. Now, Midrash is rabbinic interpretations and study that go beneath and beyond the Torah text, the Hebrew Bible. There's Midrash, which suggests that Moses wasn't the first person to pass by the burning bush. Others had walked by and ignored it. Maybe they thought they were seeing things. Maybe they assumed it was something other than what it was. Maybe they figured there was some rational explanation for a bush that burned but was not consumed. And anyway, they had things to do. Sheep to herd and goats to yell at. One way or another, as a result of their distraction or unwillingness to even go there, I just can't, they missed the presence of God manifest in plain sight. But not Moses, she says. Moses had his eyes opened. He noticed and marveled and altered his path to get a closer look, altered his path. And it was only when he did this that God spoke to him, not before. He had to alter his path. And let's remember, we're going to flesh out all the circumstance and subtext here. All of this happened with a whole flock of sheep running loose. Now, I don't have, maybe I'm alone here, I don't have a lot of sheep herding experience, but sheep herders seem busy. Like, it's a hard job. It doesn't strike me as work that allows for much detouring or meandering or taking shoes off, distraction, right? So somewhere in Moses' mind, surely had to be the question of how much time exactly do I have here? And now I need to take my shoes off in a scorching hot Saudi Arabian desert with all those rocks and thorny plants and scorpions and goodness knows what else. And yet, despite all of this, Moses turned aside. And he didn't leave. Many years ago, I used to work with a Jungian analyst as a therapist. These are therapists whose trainings are rooted in Carl Jung's study of dreams. And she taught me to assume that all the characters in my dreams were some aspect of me, for better or worse. And I like to read the Bible the same way, or any wisdom text. The Bible, like any myth story, hero's journey, written art itself, poetry, it's meant to speak to us, each of us, in this experience of being human. That's what makes it wisdom text. It has to mean something to us and be relevant, help us better know ourselves, right? And know others by virtue of that. One of Unitarian-Universalist's great historians, Reverend John Burns, says it this way: when we ask the question, where do religious traditions come from? One answer is obvious, he writes. They come from human beings, the stories of their lives. He says that, quote, underneath so much of our religious, philosophical, historic, scientific seeking lies a persistent, unanswerable question. What kind of story are we in? The Bible, he says, can only be understood when we, quote, understand what it means in our own lives now. He puts forward two questions that he believes need facing when encountering the Bible. What does this story mean for me? And what challenging questions does it pose about the living of my life? Entering these stories personally, seeing oneself in all the characters, helps to reveal the answers to these questions more fully, I think. My lofty hope as a minister and human is that I never find myself in the category of walked right by the burning bush. Or worse, saw it, but like the white rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, pulled out my oversized pocket watch and said, no time to say hello, goodbye, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late. And alas, I am human. Alas, I am human. One of you recently, and so bravely, told me that I hadn't responded to some of your emails back in the spring and that it hurt you. And the truth is that I was doing too much, too focused on the work of the day, like some of those who walked by that burning bush, massive pocket watch in hand, and I missed the invitation to turn aside and see. I have also been afraid to turn aside and see. Because if I do, I know I will be challenged and rocked and maybe even changed into I don't know what. As a white, cisgendered person, I have at times absolutely averted my gaze when faced with burning and fierce, uncomfortable truths that scare me or ask me to do something that disrupts my comfort or asks me to give something up or step aside. And I have pretended that the burning bush wasn't there, hoped that maybe someone else would deal with it. I also see myself in Moses, as all of you should as well, right? As a people of faith, searching for meaning, and when finding it, saying, yeah, here I am. Yeah, I'll take my shoes off. But I'm also terrified. There is not one prophet in the Bible, both the Hebrew and the New Testament, who isn't doubting, questioning, exhausted, and frightened. Yes, the prophets feel a blast from beyond and they feel and speak truth to power fiercely, but they're all human. And they mess up and they question themselves and they feel hopeless and they need help. Some of them weep constantly. Jeremiah, one of my faves, is known as the weeping prophet. That poor man, he weeps from chapter 1 through to chapter 52. It's like the longest book in the Hebrew Bible. That's a lot of weeping. Can we, as people of faith, enter their stories too? I think all of us can, in one way or another. Here's another midrash about Moses, offered by Reverend Amy Zucker Morgenstern. She's a UU minister, and she says that Moses goes to the far side of the wilderness, the desert, in search of a lost sheep. And it brings him to the most desolate and unknown of places. He's been climbing up and down on rocky and thorny land. He's tired. He is far from home and the comforts of home. And this is not the land of his people. And it is in this lost, wild place that he is transformed and called to something huge. This is an invitation to ask ourselves about the times when we have been lost in the wilderness. Those strange and unknown places that lead us far from home and from all we know. I'm speaking symbolically now. And that is both a personal question and a question as a community. It has led us far from home, maybe because we were searching for something in ourselves, or for direction, or for healing or meaning. Maybe we didn't know we have been lost or adrift at all until something utterly wondrous gets our attention. I felt this, something wondrous, in my recent heart-to-heart with one of you when you told me you were hurt. I felt it when some of you boldly spoke your pain about these things on our walls, and it gave me the courage to say, enough. This stuff has to come down now. Enough. Enough. Others were also cracked open by these blazes of courageous fire, and we don't know where we are going, and it feels like we are a bit lost here. But by God, we are not going to walk by the burning bush. True, Moses spoke directly to his Jewish God and negotiated with the greatest temporal power of his time, and he led the Israelites out of slavery, across the sea of reeds, through the desert, to the high mountains, and to covenant with God, and to the promised land. And by the way, this is supposed to take 11 days. It took 40 years. Was this what he signed up for? No. He was inelegant and clumsy and doubting, but he kept on, kept turning aside to see. And all of this made him one of the greatest prophets we know. And friends, most of these are achievements I am, and most of us are unlikely to ever match or even come close to matching. But the precondition for all those things happening, for all the amazing work that Moses did in the world, was the simple opening of his eyes and heart. That was it. And I believe we can do this. You've done it. You are it. We can do this. His vision was clear enough that he could see what was in front of him, recognize its sacred power, and despite being frightened, heed its call, share it and be it in the world, respond and act even though he was afraid. We are all capable of this in our own ways. These arise out of qualities inherent in us all. Know that. Reverend Jan Richardson's blessing at the burning bush captures so much of this so beautifully. You will have to decide if you want this. Want the blessing that comes to you on an ordinary day when your mind and your own path, bent on the task before you that you've done 100 times, 1,000. You will have to choose for yourself whether you will attend to the signs, whether you will open your eyes to the searing light, the heat, whether you will open your ears, your heart to the voice that knows you by name, that tells you this place where you stand, this ground so familiar and therefore unregarded, is in fact holy. You will have to discern. You will have to discern. You will know your path not by how it shines before you, but how it burns within you, leaving you whole as you go from here blazing with your inarticulate, your inescapable yes. Yes. I suspect that we all live as human beings for moments of heightened awareness in which there's more to know, to see, to feel, moments where, although fleeting, we seem to be in touch with something greater than ourselves, where all that seems so very important, it just melts away, and the very ground beneath us, the people around us feel holy. These might never be as bright as Moses' burning bush, but even in their seeming smallness, my friends, they keep us going, don't you think? They keep us going. Heart openings, moments of love and understanding, compassion, beauty, changes of mind and perspective. I'm sorry. Isn't that something? The I'm sorry. Wow, right? All of these, as my colleague Reverend Harold Babcock used to say, are reminders that the world is charged with the grandeur of God. Please translate that word for yourself. And that the sacred is accessible, that life is more than we are sometimes able to see that it is, and that most certainly, he says, life is a gift. Oh, what a gift. And so my hope for you this fall, amid all this change, which I know is so hard, amid all this change and unknownness, and the unsteady times we are living through, is that you too may occasionally catch glimpses of the divine working here and working in your lives. Wander a bit out of your comfort zones and look for it. Slow down enough to see it, be it a burning bush or daisy or salami or a flock of geese or a deer that catches you off guard, or in the testimony of someone who tells you they are hurting, or in the utterly ordinary moments of your days that hold so many invitations to turn aside and see, in the laugh of a child, or in the face of someone you love, in the smile of a stranger. May you know it all as holy. May you be changed by it, and may you do something with it. Do something with it. That is my prayer and hope for each of you. May it be so for every one of us.